Welcome, YouTubers, to another episode in my Grammar Hero series. In this video, there's going to be 45 practice test questions that should closely mirror what you should expect to see in the mathematics knowledge subtest of both the Armed Services Vocational Aptitude Battery, that is the ASVAB, as well as the PiCAT. Of course, on the actual test, you'll have 20 minutes to answer 16 questions. So you want to make sure that you can answer these questions quickly as well as accurately. As a quick reminder, you do not get a calculator or a reference sheet on the actual test. So as you take this practice test, try not to use any of those resources. And let me say this, everything on the ASVAB is very basic. That said, you have to understand the basic formulas to pass this test. So if I said to you, how do you find the area of a square? You should be able to tell me it's side length squared. If I ask you to find the volume of a cylinder, you should be able to do that. For that reason, I'm going to put a link to my free reference sheet in the description of this video. Of course, in order to get the most from this video, you'll want to pause the video after I read a practice test question, attempt to solve it on your own, and then resume playing the video to check your solution. Finally, I want to say this, please don't waste your hard-earned money or time on tutoring or expensive online boot camps. Truth be told, the vast majority of you will pass this very simple test on your first try as long as you spend a few weeks studying for it. In my opinion, it should take most of you less than a month to get ready for this test. So those tutors who are offering monthly subscriptions are really doing you a disservice. So with all that being said, let's go ahead and get started with these practice test questions. The practice test questions are in no particular order. You'll see an easy one followed by a hard one followed by an easy one. So let's get started. It's math knowledge practice test question for the ASVAB and PiCAT says, what is 250.025 rounded to the nearest hundredth? So again, we're rounding 250.025 to the nearest hundredth. Again, that's going to be to the right of the decimal. This 0 is in the 10 spot, this 2 is in the 100 spot, and this 5 is in the 1,000 spot. So we're going to look at this 2 since it's in our 100 spot, and specifically we're going to look to the number to the right of 2. If the number to the right of 2 is 5 or greater, we round up. If it's below 5, we keep this 2 the same. Since this is 5, we're going to round this up, and this becomes 250.03. All right, so this one is C. This math knowledge practice test question for the ASVAB and PiCAT says the absolute value of 13 minus 15 equals. So let's do this math. 13 minus 15 is negative 2. What is the absolute value of negative 2? That's just 2. Why is it 2? Because I know I'm going to get that question. Well, the absolute value of a number is its distance away from 0 without regard to its sign. So here's negative 2. How far away is negative 2 from 0? It's 1, 2 places away from negative 0. So again, that's absolute value. And this one is D. This math knowledge practice test question for the ASVAB and PiCAT says 1/2 plus 1/3 plus 1/4. So we're adding these three fractions together. And again, you can't use a calculator on this test. In order to add fractions, they all have to have the same or a common denominator. So what we're going to do is rewrite all three of these fractions with a common denominator so that we can add them, of course. 2, 3, and 4 all go into 12. So 12 is going to be our common denominator. To write 2 as 12, I have to multiply it by 6. I'm also going to do that to its numerator. To write 3 as 12, I have to multiply it by 4. I also have to do that to its numerator. And to write 4 as 12, I have to multiply it by 3. I'm also going to have to do that to its numerator. Again, when you add fractions, you keep your denominator the same. Uh, 6 plus 4 is 10, plus 3 is 13. All right, so we got the improper fraction 13 over 12. The next thing we have to do is convert this improper fraction to mixed number, and we could do that via long division. We could read this as 13 divided by 12. How many times does 12 go into 13 without going over? That's one time. 1 times 12 is 12. 13 minus 12 is 1. All right, we have enough to write our mixed number. This 1 is going to be our whole number. This remainder of 1 is going to be our numerator, and this 12 is going to be our denominator. So this one, as you can see, is a 1 and 1/12. This math knowledge practice test question says, how many minutes are there in 1 week? So for this one, you have to know that there are 7 days in 1 week, and there are 24 hours in 1 day. So if there are 7 days in a week and 24 hours in a day, there are 24 times 7 hours in a week. 4 times 7 is 28. Bring down an 8, carry a 2. 7 times 2 is 14, plus 2 is 16. So there are 168 hours in a week. What else do you need to know to convert this to minutes? You have to know that there are 60 minutes in every hour. So if there are 168 hours in a week, there are 168 times 60 minutes in a week. 0 times these three is going to give you 3 zeros. Before we start multiplication with the 6, we have to add a 0 placeholder. 6 times 8 is going to be 48, carry a 4. 6 times 6 is 36, plus 4 is 40, carry a 4. 6 times 1 is 6, plus 4 is 10. Add this together. This is going to be 10,080 minutes in a 7 day week, since there are 24 hours in a day, 168 hours in a week, and 60 minutes in an hour. So this one is A. This math knowledge practice test question says, what is 6 factorial? So factorial means you take the number that you're given. So 3 factorial, for example, means you take the number 3. You multiply it by every number that's less than 3 until you get to 1. So that would be 3 times 2 times 1. 3 times 2 is 6. 6 times 1 is 6. So 3 factorial is 6. Let's do the same thing with 6 factorial. That's 6 times 5 times 4 times 3 times 2 times 1. 6 times 5 is 30. 30 times 4, well, 3 times 4 would be 1. 3 times 4 would be 12. Therefore, 30 times 4 is 120. 120 times 3, well, 12 times 3 would be 36. Therefore, 120 times 3 is going to be 360. 36 times 2 would be 72. Therefore, 360 times 2 is going to be 720. 720 times 1 is 720. So this one is B, 720. ASVAB PiCAT Math Knowledge Practice Test question says, what is 7a minus ab plus 8b subtracted from 3a minus 9ab plus b? So a lot of people don't set this one up correctly. This is how you have to set it up down here. What if this problem said, what is 10 subtracted from 20? Most people would say 20 minus 10. Well, that's the same thing we did down here. The only difference is we have to take this negative and distribute it here, here, and here. This becomes 3a minus 9ab plus b minus 7a. Negative times a negative is a positive, plus ab. Negative times a positive is a negative ab. Just go ahead and combine like terms. 3a and negative 7a is negative 4a. Negative 9ab and 1ab is negative 8ab. And b and negative ab is negative 7b. So this one is going to be A. This math knowledge practice test question for the ASVAB and PiCAT says, in a standard deck of playing cards, a king of hearts is drawn and not replaced. What is the probability of drawing another king from the deck? So in a standard deck of playing cards, there are 4 kings and there are 52 cards in total. So according to the problem, a king of hearts is drawn. So when that card is drawn, what happens to the deck? Well, we're down to 3 kings in the deck and 51 cards in the deck. We can see that this isn't an answer choice. So, what do we know about 51? 5 plus 1 is 6. Therefore, 51 is divisible by 3. So, in other words, we could reduce this fraction. 3 divided by 3 is 1. What is 51 divided by 3? Well, if you can't do that mentally, do the long division here. 3 goes into 5 one time without going over. 1 times 3 is 3. 5 minus 3 is 2. Drop down this 1. 3 times 7 is 21. We have no remainder. So this is 1 over 17. Your odds of drawing another king from the deck, which had 1 removed previously, is C, 1 over 17. This math knowledge practice test question for the ASVAB and PiCAT says simplify 32 over 7. So 32 over 7 is an improper fraction because the numerator is bigger than the denominator. So we can convert this to mixed number, and to do that we use long division. We read this as 32 divided by 7. How many times does 7 go into 32 without going over? That's 4 times. 4 times 7 is 28. 32 minus 28 is 4. So we have enough information to write our mixed number. This 4 is going to be our whole number. This remainder of 4 is going to be our numerator. And this 7 is going to be our denominator. So this one is B, 4 and 4 sevenths. This math knowledge practice test question for the ASVAB and PiCAT says 3 minus 1 times 7 minus 12 divided by 2 equals. So we're evaluating this expression here. It's all jumbled up with parentheses, multiplication, and division. So that's a clue that as you work on this one, you need to follow the order of operations, which I remember using the acronym PEMDAS, that is parentheses, exponents, multiplication, division, addition, and subtraction. This tells you the order in which to work this out. You do parentheses first, exponents next, if there are any. You do multiplication and division as they appear in the expression from left to right. That is to say, they're treated as equals. And then you do addition and subtraction likewise after that, as they appear in the expression from left to right. That is to say, addition and subtraction are treated as equals. So let me copy this down and we'll go through it. We have 3 minus 1 times 7 minus 12 divided by 2. All right, so right away we have our highest order, that is parentheses. So we're going to work that out. First, 3 minus 1 is 2. So this is 2 times 7 minus 12 divided by 2. Do we have any exponents in this expression? We do not, so we move on. What do we have left? We have multiplication, subtraction, and division. Again, we do multiplication and division before addition and subtraction, but as I said, we do multiplication and division as they appear from left to right. So we're going to do this multiplication. 2 times 7 is 14. 14 minus 12 divided by 2. What do we have left? We have subtraction and division. Again, we do division before subtraction. So let's do that. This is 14 minus 12 divided by 2 is 6. 14 minus 6, again, we only have one operation left, is 8. So this one is 8. Again, if your instructor or whoever you're studying with does not tell you that multiplication and division have equal precedence and are worked out from left to right, likewise, addition and subtraction have equal precedence and they're worked out from left to right, they are misleading you. They're probably not an expert instructor. This math knowledge practice test question for the ASVAB and PiCAT says, what is the volume of a cube with edge lengths of 7 centimeters? So to find the volume of a cube, you take its edge length, which I'm going to call A, and you're going to cube it. Well, in this case, we're told that A is 7 centimeters. So this is 7 to the third. What is 7 to the third equal to? That's 7 multiplied by itself 3 times. 7 times 7 is 49. What is 49 times 7? Well, if you can't do that one mentally, there's no shame in doing it off to the side. 9 times 7 is going to be 63. So bring down a 3, carry a 6. 4 times 7 is 28, 29, 30, 31, 32, 33, 34. All right, so the volume of a cube with edge lengths of 7 centimeters is 343 centimeters. And since we're talking about volume, this is going to be cube. So this one is C. You just have to know this formula for this test. This math knowledge practice test question for the ASVAB and PiCAT says if A equals 5 over 2, then 1 over A equals. So again, A is 5 over 2 according to the problem, and we want to know what 1 over A is. Well, what are we going to do? We're going to take 5 over 2 and plug it in for A. This becomes 1 over 5 over 2. What is this? We're dividing a whole number by a fraction. So what are we going to do? We're going to follow the algorithm keep, change, flip. We're going to keep this top number the same. So this equals 1. We're going to change from division here to multiplication. And then we're going to flip this bottom fraction here. So instead of 5 over 2, it's going to be 2 over 5. 1 times any number is that number itself. So 1 times 2 over 5 is just 2 over 5. So we can see that 1 over A is C, 2 over 5. By the way, this is how you find the reciprocal of a number, 1 over A. This math knowledge practice test question says, what percent of 3/4 is 1/8? So I'm going to translate this statement into an equation and then solve it. That said, I'm going to rephrase this one, and I'm going to rephrase it like this. 1/8 is in math is equal what percent? That's unknown, so call that P of 3/4. So we're going to be solving this equation for P. The first thing we're going to do is multiply both sides of the equation by the reciprocal of 3 over 4, that is 4 over 3. And in doing so, this clears out, leaving you with P on this side. All right, here we're multiplying two fractions, so we're going to multiply straight across. 4 times 1 is 4. 3 times 8 is 24. So P is equal to 4 over 24. We can reduce this to make it a little bit easier by a common factor of 4. 4 divided by 4 is 1. 24 divided by 4 is 6. Now, what percent is 1/6? Well, we can figure that out by doing log division. I could read this as 1 divided by 6. 6 does not go into 1, so I have to add a decimal, and I'm going to add a couple of zero placeholders, bring my decimal into my answer. How many times does 6 go into 10 without going over? That's one time. 6 times 1 is 6. 10 minus 6 is 4. Again, drop down one of our zeros. How many times does 6 go into 40 without going over? That's 6 times. 6 times 6 is 36. 40 minus 36 is 4. Drop down this 0. As you can see, this pattern is going to repeat. So this is 1.1666, which is the same thing as 16.67%. This is answer choice C. This math knowledge practice test question for the ASVAB and PiCAT says, how many distinct prime factors are there in 120? Again, what are prime factors? Prime factors are only divisible by 1 in itself. 1 is never prime, so don't include 1. 2's prime, 3's prime, 5's prime, and 7's prime. So these are possible prime factors. So we're going to take 120 and we're going to break it down using 2, 3, 5, and probably not 7 until we have it factorized. So let's start. Let's do 2 and 60. 60 is 3 and 20. 20 is 5 and 4 is 2 and 2. So what are our prime factors? They're 2, 3, 5, 2, and 2. So let's write that out. We have 2, 2, 2, 3, and 5. If we multiply all these prime factors together, we'll get 120. How many distinct prime factors are there? Well, we have 2. That's one distinct prime factor. 3, that's another distinct prime factor. And 5, that's another distinct prime factor. So we have 3 distinct prime factors. So this one is B. This math knowledge practice test question for the ASVAB and PiCAT says, what is the area of a circle that has a diameter of 4 units? Use 3.14 to approximate pi. So for the ASVAB and PiCAT, you have to know some basic formulas from geometry, including how to calculate the area of a circle. Area of a circle is pi r squared, where r is the radius, of course. In this case, we were given the diameter of the circle, so we also have to know that the diameter of a circle is always equal to twice its radius. That is d equals 2r. Since our diameter is 4, we can plug it in for d here. This is 4 equals 2r. Divide both sides by 2 now to get r by itself. 4 divided by 2 is 2. Now that we know r is 2, we can plug it in right here. And likewise, we were told to use 3.14 to approximate pi. So that's what we'll do there. This becomes 3.14 times 2 squared. 2 squared is the same thing as 2 times 2, which is 4. So this is 3.14 times 4. All right, let's do this math off to the side if you can't do it mentally. This is 3.14 times 4. We have to move this decimal in 3.14 2 times to the right to rewrite this as 314 times 4, albeit with 2 decimals to move back into the left when we're done. 4 times 4 is 16, carry a 1. 1 times 4 is 4 plus 1 is 5. 3 times 4 is 12. Bring our 2 decimals back in. We can see that the area of our circle is 12.56 square units, which is answer choice C, of course. This math knowledge practice test question says if x equals 2, what is the value of 8x minus x? So again, we're going to be evaluating the expression 8x minus x when x equals 2. So we're going to take 2 and plug it in for x here and here. This becomes 8 times 2 minus 2. We're going to follow the order of operations. So we're going to do multiplication first and subtraction after that. 8 times 2 is 16. 16 minus 2 is 14. So this one is D 14. This math knowledge practice test question for the ASVAB and PiCAT says, if one side of a hexagon is x plus 2, what is its perimeter? So here's a hexagon. As you can see, it's a six-sided figure, and all the sides are equal. If one side's x plus 2, then all these other sides are x plus 2. That said, how do you find the perimeter of a regular polygon, including a hexagon? You add up all of its sides. Instead of doing x plus 2 plus x plus 2 plus x plus 2 six times, we're going to do 6 times x plus 2. And again, we're just going to take this 6 and multiply it here and here. This becomes 6x plus 12. So the perimeter of a hexagon with one side being x plus 2 is 6x plus 12. Answer choice C in this case. This math knowledge practice test question for the ASVAB and PiCAT says which number is prime. So here are the prime numbers from 1 to 100. As you can see, 1 is never considered prime, and we can see that 2 is prime. Well, how do we know that 2 is prime? A number is considered prime if it's only divisible by 1 in itself. So 2 only has two factors, notably 2 and 1, that is 1 in itself. But that said, how do we quickly know that 57 and 87 are divisible by something other than 1 in itself? Well, you have to know your divisibility rules. The divisibility rule for 2 says if the last digit in the number is even, then that number is divisible by 2 and can't be prime. Both of these end in 7, which is odd, so we can't use this divisibility rule. The divisibility rule for 5 says if the last digit ends in 0 or 5, then that number is divisible by 5 and can't be prime. These are both 7. And the divisibility rule for 3 says sum the digits. If the sum of the digits is divisible by 3, then the number itself is divisible by 3. So for example, here we have 5 and 7. Our digits are 5 and 7. When we add those up, we get 12. Is 12 divisible by 3? It is. 12 divided by 3 is 4. Since the sum of the digits in 57 is divisible by 3. I know 57 is divisible by 3. What about 87? Again, sum the digits. Our digits are 8 and 7. 8 and 7 is 15. Is 15 divisible by 3? It is. 15 divided by 3 is 5. Since the sum of the digits is divisible by 3, I know 87 is also divisible by 3 and therefore cannot be prime. All right, so that is that one. This math knowledge practice test question for the ASVAB and PiCAT says if the diameter of a circle is 57.3 centimeters, what is its diameter in meters? So we have a circle with a diameter of 57.3 centimeters, and we want to convert that to be in terms of meters. Well, this is a part of the metric system, and the good thing about the metric system, as you can see, is you either divide by 10, 100, or 1,000, or multiply by 1,000, 100, or 10 accordingly. In this case, we're going from centimeters to meters. So you can see we're going to take the number that we're given and we're going to divide it by 100. Well, why is this math so easy? Whenever you take a number that has a decimal and you multiply or divide it by a power of 10, such as 10, 100, or 1,000, you just take that decimal and you either shift it left or right according to how many zeros there are in that power of 10. In 100, there are two zeros, and we're doing division. So I'm going to take this decimal and 57.3. I'm going to move it to the left two times to make this 0.573. Of course, that's meters now that we've converted this. So this one is B. Again, you should know these common conversions for the metric unit. All you're really doing is taking your decimal place and moving it left or right either once, twice, or three times accordingly. This Math knowledge practice test question for the ASVAB and PiCAT says which equation can be used to calculate the hypotenuse of the right triangle? So to answer this one, you have to know the Pythagorean theorem. Again, you don't get a reference sheet on this test, so you do have to commit that one to memory. If you don't know it already, that is. Pythagorean theorem says a squared plus b squared equals c squared, where c is the hypotenuse of the right triangle and a and b are its legs. So I'm going to say a is 4 and b is 6. And let's go ahead and plug those values in accordingly. This becomes 4 squared plus 6 squared equals c squared. And if you look at our answer choices, they either start with c or c squared. So I'm going to move this c squared over here. This becomes c squared equals 4 squared plus 6 squared. Does this match one of our answer choices? Because if it does, we can stop right here. We don't have to go any further. C squared equals 4 squared plus 6 squared. So we can use equation B to calculate the hypotenuse of this right triangle. We do not have to go any further. This math knowledge practice test question for the ASVAB and PiCAT says solve for x. We have x squared minus x minus 6 equals 0. So this is a quadratic trinomial with a leading coefficient of 1. Therefore, we should be able to factor it. And if we can, it's going to look like this. X times x in parentheses equals 0. Now we're looking for two numbers that multiply to negative 6 but add to negative 1. It's going to be negative 3 and positive 2. Again, negative 3 times positive 2 is negative 6. Negative 3 plus 2 is negative 1. Now that we've factored this, we're going to set each of these equal to 0 independently, and then we're going to solve for x. So I'm going to say x minus 3 equals 0. That's going to be one of our solutions, and x plus 2 equals 0. That's going to be our other solution. To get x by itself over here, we just add 3 to both sides. This says x equals 3. To get x by itself over here, we're going to subtract 2 from both sides. This says x equals negative 2. So our solution is x equals 3 or x equals negative 2. So this one, as you can see, is going to be B. This math knowledge practice test question for the ASVAB and PiCAT says 7 more than 3 times a number is equal to 70. Find the number. So we're going to translate these statements into an equation that will then solve. 7 more means 7 plus 3 times a number, let's call that number n. So that's 3 times n is in math is equal to 70. So all we have to do is solve this equation for n, subtract 7 from both sides to get started. This crosses out, leaving you a 3n over here. 70 minus 7 is 63. Divide both sides by 3 now to get n by itself. Again, don't do the long division here. Do some mental math. 6 divided by 3 is 2. 3 divided by 3 is 1. So n is C21. This math knowledge practice test question for the ASVAB and PiCAT says this. What is the area of this square? We can see that we have a square and it's 5 feet across that way. How do you find the area of a square? It's one of the formulas that you do have to know for this test. Area of a square is its side length squared. What is the side length of this square? Well, in squares, all the sides are equal, and we could represent its side length with the letter S. And you should be able to see that this 5 feet corresponds to the side length of this square. So we know S is 5 in this case. Let's plug that in here. This is 5 squared. 5 squared is 5 times 5, which is 25. So this one is C. The area of this square is 25 square feet. This math knowledge practice test question for the ASVAB and PiCAT says, what is the area of the rectangle? You can see that we have a rectangle that's 2.5 units wide and 8 units long. How do you find the area of a rectangle? It's area equals length times width. I think they teach this formula in middle school, if not elementary school. But for the ASVAB and PiCAT, you have to have it memorized since you don't get a formula sheet on the test. So let's go ahead and plug these values in and solve accordingly. We know our length is 8 units and our width is 2.5 units. So this is 8 times 2.5. Now, many of you can solve this mentally because you can break 2.5 apart. 8 times 2 is 16. 1/2 times 8 is 4. 16 plus 4 is 20. So the area of this rectangle is 20 square units. That said, let's say you haven't done this math with fractions in a long time. Let me show you how to do it. We got 8 times 2.5, we're going to write 2.5 to be an improper fraction, and I'm going to write 8 to be a fraction by placing it over 1. So this is 8 over 1. To write 2.5 as an improper fraction, we do 2 times 2, which is 4 plus 1. So that's 5 over 2. Again, now we're multiplying two fractions. When you multiply two fractions, you just multiply straight across. 8 times 5 is 40. 1 times 2 is 2. 40 divided by 2 is 20. So if you forgot how to do this mentally, you could always do it the old-fashioned way as well. So that is that one. This practice test question for the math knowledge subtest of the ASVAB and PiCAT says, which pairs of angles are equal in measurement? So the first thing I want to point out is that angles 1, 2, 3, and 4 share a vertex. Angles that are on opposite sides of a shared vertex are equal. So angles 1 and 4 are equal, 3 and 2 are equal. Down here, 5, 6, 7, and 8 share a vertex. So 7 and 6 are equal, 5 and 8 are equal. Additionally, you have to know the alternate interior angles theorem, which says if two parallel lines are cut by a transversal, then the alternate interior angles are also congruent, that is, equal to each other. So let's go through our answer choices one by one. 1 and 2. 1 and 2 form a straight line, therefore they are supplementary. Angles 4 and 5. Well, as you can see, those are alternate interior angles, therefore they are going to be equal. So this one is B. This math knowledge practice test question for the ASVAB and PiCAT says which expression represents the volume of a cylinder whose height is equivalent to the length of the radius. So what's a cylinder look like? It has a circular top and bottom that are connected via a tube. How do you find its volume? Well, you really don't have to memorize anything as long as you know how to find the area of a circle. Again, this is a circular face. Its area is pi r squared. And then all we do is multiply that by the height of the cylinder, which is h. All right, so that's how you derive the formula. In this case, we're told that its height is equal to its radius. So in place of h here, we can actually plug in r. This becomes pi r squared times r. Now, using the laws of exponents, notably the product law, we can actually do r squared times r. Again, the product law says a to the m times a to the n is equal to a to the m plus n. That is, you add their exponents. So r squared times r, again, there is no power here, so we assume it's 1, is going to be equal to r to the 2 plus 1, which is r to the third. So this is pi times r to the third, which, as you can see, is answer choice B. Again, you would never square pi for any reason, so those are obviously wrong. All right, so this one is B. This math knowledge practice test question for the ASVAB and PiCAT says if x plus 7 is greater than 3, then x could equal. So we have x plus 7 being greater than 3. We're going to solve this one-step inequality by subtracting 7 from both sides. This crosses out. This says x is greater than 3 minus 7 is negative 4. What does this look like on a number line? So we're going to go to negative 4 on the number line. We're going to put an open circle here because we do not include negative 4. And x is greater than all the values that are greater than negative 4. So negative 3, negative 2, negative 1. So we put an arrow going this way to indicate that x is all the values that are greater than negative 4. And the only value of our answer choices that is greater than negative 4 is D, negative 3. So this one is D. This math knowledge practice test question for the ASVAB and PiCAT says, what is the area of a triangle that has a base of 12 units and a height of 10 units? So you really don't have to sketch anything for this one. Instead, you just have to know the formula to find the area of a triangle. That's area equals 1/2 base times height. Of course, we're told that the base is 12 units, so B is 12, and the height is 10 units. So we'll just go ahead and plug those values in respectively. This becomes 1/2 times, again, the base was 12 and the height was 10. And we could do this math very quickly. What is 1/2 of 12? 1/2 times 12 is 6. So this is 6 times 10. 6 times 10 is 60. So its area is B 60 square units. Now, if you couldn't do 1/2 times 12, I'll do it off to the side very quickly for you. You have 1/2 times 12. You write 12 as a fraction by placing it over 1. When you multiply two fractions, you multiply straight across. 1 times 12 is 12. 2 times 1 is 2. 12 divided by 2 is 6. All right, so that is that one. This math knowledge practice test question for the ASVAB and PiCAT says solve -22 plus 33. All right, so at first glance, this may look challenging until you realize that we can simply rewrite this to be 33 minus 22. Again, if you can't do that mentally for some reason, go ahead and do it the old-fashioned way here. 33 minus 22. 3 minus 2 is 1. 3 minus 2 is 1. So this one is D11. If you need more help with adding and subtracting integers, find that video on my channel and go through it. But that is that one. This math knowledge practice test question for the ASVAB and PiCAT says this. Simplify 2 times a minus b in parentheses plus 4 times a plus 3b in parentheses. So on the actual ASVAB and PiCAT, you will have scratch paper. So let's start by copying this one down. We have 2 times a minus b plus 4 times a plus 3b. Of course, the next step here is to distribute this to here and here, and to take this 4 and distribute it here and here. 2 times a is 2a. 2 times negative b is negative 2b. 4 times a is plus 4a. 4 times 3b, 4 times 3 is 12. Therefore, 4 times 3b is 12b. Now that we've distributed that, we're going to go ahead and combine like terms in this expression. Again, like terms have the same letter variables raised to the same power. So we have a to the first power. Its corresponding like terms here, 4a to the first power. 2a plus 4a is simply 6a. Now that we've combined them, I like to cross them out. Then we have negative 2b. Its corresponding like term is 12b. 12b minus 2b is plus 10b. So this one is going to be a 6a plus 10b. This math knowledge practice test question for the ASVAB and PiCAT says simplify 3x times negative x squared minus x minus 1. So to get started, I'm going to copy this one down. We have 3x times negative x squared minus x minus 1. And we're going to take 3x and distribute it here, here, and here. 3x times negative x squared, a positive times a negative is going to be a negative 3x to the third. 3x times negative x is going to be negative 3x squared. And negative 3x times negative 1 is negative 3x. So this one is negative 3x to the third minus 3x squared minus 3x, which is answer choice D. This ASVAB PiCAT Math Knowledge Practice Test question says, if the diameter of a circle is 15 units, what is its radius? So for this one, you have to know that the diameter of a circle is always equal to twice its radius. In this case, we're told that our diameter is 15 units, so D is 15. So we'll plug that in accordingly. And we want to know what its radius is. So we're going to be solving this equation for R. To do that, we're going to divide both sides by 2. This crosses out, leaving you with R over here. We can see that R is 15 over 2. Most of you could do that mentally and say it's 7.5. That said, on test day, you might be a little bit nervous, so we'll do the long division off to the side. Again, we could read this as 15 divided by 2. 2 goes into 15 7 times without going over. 2 times 7 is 14. 15 minus 14 is 1. Again, there's technically a decimal here in 15 and a 0 after it. Bring that decimal into our answer. Drop down that 0. 2 times 5 is exactly 10. And we have no remainder, so we can stop. So that's how we got 7.5. Again, this one is C, 7.5 units. ASVAB PiCAT Math Knowledge Practice Test question says if 100 over 5 times 5 over 100 equals 5c, then c equals. So I'm going to solve this one two different ways. Again, right here we're multiplying two fractions. When you multiply fractions, you multiply straight across. 100 times 5 is 500. 5 times 100 is 500 equals 5c. 500 divided by 500 is 1 equals 5c. Again, to get c by itself, we're going to divide both sides by 5. You can see that c is equal to 1/5. All right, let's go ahead and solve this one by cross reducing. 100 goes into 100 one time, 100 goes into 100 one time, 5 goes into 5 one time, 5 goes into 5 one time. 1 over 1 is just 1. 1 over 1 is just 1. 1 times 1 is just 1. So this is 1 equals 5c. Divide both sides by 5 now to get c by itself. And you can see c is 1/5. This math knowledge practice test question says if x equals 2, what is the value of 8x minus x? So again, we're going to be evaluating the expression 8x minus x when x equals 2. So we're going to take 2 and plug it in for x here and here. This becomes 8 times 2 minus 2. We're going to follow the order of operations. So we're going to do multiplication first and subtraction after that. 8 times 2 is 16. 16 minus 2 is 14. So this one is D, 14. This math knowledge practice test question for the ASVAB and PiCAT says the angles of a triangle are in the ratio 3 to 4 to 5. What is the measure of the smallest angle? So for this one, you have to know that triangles always have 3 angles, and those 3 angles always add up to 180 degrees. Since our angles have a ratio of 3 to 4 to 5, I can rewrite angle 1 as 3x, angle 2 as 4x, and angle 3 as 5x. And of course, these equal 180. So I can solve for x, and then by multiplying x by 3x, I'll know that measure of angle 1 here. 3x plus 4x plus 5x is going to be 12x equals 180. Divide both sides by 12 now. This crosses out, leaving you with x on this side. You should notice that 18 and 12, or 180 and 12 have a common factor of 6. So if you can't do this one mentally, reduce it. 18 divided by 6 is 3. Therefore, 180 divided by 6 is going to be 30. 12 divided by 6 is 2. 30 divided by 2 is 15. So we know angle 1 is the smallest angle, and x is 15 degrees. So angle 1 is 3x. 3 times 15 is 45. The smallest angle in this triangle is C, 45 degrees. This math knowledge practice test question for the math knowledge subtest of the ASVAB and PiCAT says this: using 22 over 7 to approximate pi, find the area of a circle that has a diameter of ½ inch. All right, so since we're going to have to calculate the area of a circle, the first thing I'm going to do is write down that formula. That's area equals pi r squared. You do have to know that formula for this test, of course. Now, if we look back at the question, it says our circle has a diameter of ½ inch. To use this formula, we need radius. So you also have to know that the diameter of a circle is always equal to twice its radius. In this case, we know our diameter is ½ inch, so that's going to be equal to 2r. And we're going to solve this little equation for r to find out how long our radius is. To clear this 2 in front of the r, we're going to multiply both sides by 1/2. This 2 and this 1/2 cross out. Again, 2 times 1/2 is just 1. So that's just r over here. 1/2 times 1/2. When you multiply fractions, you just multiply straight across. In other words, we do 1 times 1, which is 1. 2 times 2 is 4. So now we know our radius is 1/4. We can go ahead and plug it in. Likewise, we know that we're going to be using 22 over 7 to approximate pi, so we'll plug that in as well. So this becomes 22 over 7 times 1/4 squared. So we're going to follow the order of operations here. That is, we're going to do this exponent first, and then we'll do the multiplication after that. What is 1/4 squared? And I'm going to do this off to the side so you can see it. When you square a fraction, this square goes both to the 1 as well as the 4. 1 squared is just 1. So this becomes 22 over 7 times 1 over, what is 4 squared? That's 4 times 4, or 16. All right, again, we're multiplying two fractions, so we're going to multiply straight across. Before we multiply straight across, we want to try to reduce this via cross reduction to make this math a lot easier. I know that 2 goes into 16 8 times. Likewise, 2 goes into 22 11 times. So this is going to be 11 times 1, which is 11, over 7 times 8, which is 56. So our area is 1156 square inches, which we can see is answer choice D. This is a pretty hard problem because, again, you had to know that the diameter of a circle is always twice its radius. And you also had to know how to square and multiply fractions. So, again, this is kind of a tough problem. This math knowledge practice test question for the ASVAB and PiCAT says if x is a positive integer, solve x squared plus 6x equals 16. So I'm going to copy this one down as is. We're trying to solve for x. We have x squared plus 6x equaling 16. Again, we're told x has to be a positive integer. So you should recognize that if I subtract 16 from both sides, this becomes x squared plus 6x minus 16, and 16 minus 16 is 0. We have a quadratic trinomial with the leading coefficient of 1, which means if we could factor it, it's going to look like this. Now we can solve for x. We're looking for two numbers that multiply to negative 16, but add to positive 6. That's going to be negative 2 and positive 8. Again, negative 2 times positive 8 is negative 16. 8 minus 2 is 6. All right, so now we're going to set each of these equal to 0 individually. We have x minus 2 equals 0 and x plus 8 equals 0. Add 2 to both sides to solve for x here. This crosses out. This says x equals 2. Subtract 8 from both sides here. This says x equals negative 8. What was the stipulation in this question? X has to be a positive integer. This is a negative integer, so our only solution is x equals 2. So this one is A. This math knowledge practice test question for the ASVAB and PiCAT says which of the following expressions is equivalent to 5x minus 4 minus 8x plus 10. All right, so we have 5x minus 4 minus 8x plus 10. So all we have to do is go through this expression and combine like terms to find its equivalent expression. So 5x and negative 8x are like terms. 5x minus 8x is negative 3x. Now that we've combined them, cross them out. Negative 4 and 10 are like terms. 10 minus 4 is 6. So the equivalent expression is negative 3x plus 6, which you can see is answer choice C, of course. This math knowledge practice test question for the ASVAB and PiCAT says if the square root of x plus 6 equals 16, then x equals. So I'm going to start by copying this one down. The square root of x plus 6 equals 16. Again, we're solving this equation for x, so we want to get x equal to something by itself. So let's subtract 6 from both sides. This crosses out, leaving you with the square root of x over here equals 16 minus 6 is 10. To get rid of this square root, we're going to square both sides of our equation. Uh, the square of a square root, just cancel those out, leaving you with x over here. 10 squared is the same thing as 10 times 10, which is 100. So x is 100, as you can see. That said, it's always a good idea to quickly check your work. And to do that, we're going to take 100 and we're going to plug it in for x. This says the square root of 100 plus 6 equals 16. If this makes a true statement, we know we did our work correctly. Square root of 100 is 10 plus 6 equals 16. 10 plus 6 is 16. Does 16 equal 16? It does. Therefore, we know D is the correct answer. This math knowledge practice test question for the ASVAB and PiCAT says, if a square has an area of 64 square units, what is its perimeter? So we're talking about the area as well as the perimeter of a square. You have to know both of these formulas for this test. The area of a square is its side length squared, that is s squared. The perimeter of a square is 4 times one of its side lengths, s. Well, in this case, we were told the area of our square, A, is 64 square units. So we could go ahead and plug in 64 for A. And we can actually solve this for s, which we can then plug in down here for s and get our answer. Again, to get rid of this square on s, we're going to do the opposite operation. We're going to take the square root of both sides. This crosses out, leaving us with s over here. Square root of 64 is 8. Now that we know s is 8, we can plug it into the perimeter formula. 4 times 8 is 32. So its perimeter is B, 32 units. This ASVAB PiCAT Math Knowledge Practice Test question says, what is the slope of a line that runs through the points -2, 5, and 1, 7? So for the ASVAB and PiCAT, you have to know a lot of basic formulas from middle school and high school, including how to calculate slope. Slope is found using the formula m. M refers to slope equals y2 minus y1 all over x2 minus x1. And you might be saying to yourself, well, where do I get x1, y1, x2, y2 from? Again, all ordered pairs come in the form xy. So I can say -2 is going to be x1, 5 is going to be y1, this 1 is going to be x2, and this 7 is going to be y2. Now that we know those values, we can go ahead and plug them in. Y2 is right here, it's 7, minus y1, it's 5, over x2. X2 is right here, it's 1, minus x1, which is -2. 7 minus 5 is pretty easy to do. That's 2. 1 minus -2. Minus a negative becomes a plus. 1 plus 2 is 3. So the slope is d 2/3. Now, if you want additional practice with calculating slope, check out the playlist on my channel. I'll put a link to it in the description of the video. But I have playlists for every topic that shows up on the ASVAB. So, for example, I have a playlist on slope. The first video gives you a review of how to calculate slope, followed by about 15 practice test questions. So check that out. Again, it shouldn't cost you more than $30 to prepare for this test, if that, and it should take you less than a month to get ready for it too. So again, stick with free resources and you'll be fine on this test. This math knowledge practice test question for the ASVAB and PiCAT says 12 is 15% of what number? So we're going to translate this statement into an equation that we'll then solve. 12 is in math is equal, 12 equals 15% as a decimal is 0.15, of is multiply. What number? That number is unknown, so call it x. So we're going to be solving this one-step equation for x by dividing both sides by 0.15. This crosses out, leaving you with x over here. What is 12 divided by 0.15? Well, you can't do long division with the decimal outside the division bar, so you have to move this decimal 2 times to make that 15. And you're going to move this decimal after 12 a corresponding number of times, that is 1, 2. So this becomes 1200 divided by 15. And you know that has to be a pretty big number, right? Can't be 1.8. 15 times 1.8 is going to be less than 30. This is going to be a very small number. So we know that this is either 18 or 80. And if you can't figure that out, you can quickly do it off to the side. You can do 15 times 18. 5 times 8 is 40. So bring down a 0, carry a 4. 8 times 1 is 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Add a 0 placeholder. 1 times 5 is 5. 1 times 1 is 1. You can see that this is only going to be 270, which is too small. So 15 times 80 is exactly 1200. And you don't have to work that out with no remainder. So this one is going to be D80. This math knowledge practice test question says the greatest common factor of 24 and 36 is. So for this one, you have to understand the difference between your least common multiple and your greatest common factor. So the way I know the difference is like this. The greatest common factor of two numbers is always going to be smaller than the given two numbers. So I know that our greatest common factor of 24 and 36 is going to be smaller than 24 and 36. So 72 is not a possibility. What are the factors of 24 and 36? Well, 6 goes into both of them and 12 goes into both of them. The greatest or the biggest common factor is 12. Least common multiple. The least common multiple, as I just said, is always going to be bigger than the two numbers. And here's why. This is how you find the least common multiple. Line up those two numbers, 24 and 36, and then you list out their multiples. We have 24, 48, 72. Here we have 36, 72. What common multiple do they have? It's 72. So 72 was their least common multiple. 12 was their greatest common factor. This math knowledge practice test question for the ASVAB and PiCAT says if the area of a square is 400 square units, what is the length of its side? So for this one, all you have to know is how to find the area of a square. That formula is area of a square is equal to its side length squared. In this case, we know its area is 400 square units, so we'll plug that in. This becomes 400 equals s squared. So we're going to be solving for s because s equals the side length of the square. To get s by itself, we're going to take the square root of both sides. This crosses out here, leaving you with s over here. The square root of 400 is 20. So this one is the side length of the square is 20. This one is A. This ASVAB PiCAT Math Knowledge Practice Test question says solve for x. We have 3 plus 4 times x minus 2 equals 15. In other words, we're going to be solving this equation for x. That is, we want to get x equal to something by itself. Let's get started by subtracting 3 from both sides. In doing so, this crosses out over here, leaving you with 4 times x minus 2 on this side. 15 minus 3 is 12. Do we have to take this 4 and multiply it out to the x and negative 2? We don't have to do that. We can go ahead and divide both sides by 4 in this case. In doing so, that leaves you with x minus 2 over here. 12 divided by 4 is 3. Again, to get x by itself, we're now going to add 2 to both sides. This crosses out, leaving you with x over here. 3 plus 2 is 5. So x equals 5. That said, you always want to check your work. We're going to go ahead and plug in 5 in the original equation and see if it makes a true mathematical statement. This becomes 3 plus 4 times 5 minus 2 equals 15. This says 3 plus, again, we're going to work out what's in parentheses first. 5 minus 2 is 3 equals 15. This is 3 plus 4 times 3 is 12 equals 15. 3 plus 12 is 15. Does 15 equal 15? It does. That's a true statement. Therefore, we know 5 is the correct solution. For the ASVAB and PiCAT, you will have to solve at least 4 or 5 equations, so make sure you can do this.